What if there was a podcast that did it all? Sports, politics, world events. Well, that's what we've got. You're listening to C&C Talks.
Hello, I'm Colin.
And I'm Charlie.
Welcome to episode 20 of the C&C Talks podcast, and a bit of a shorter episode today, given that we just released a midterm preview special, which you should go and listen to. It is available on any platform that you are currently listening to this on.
And just a reminder, as you do every week, we release every Tuesday, except this week, where we're releasing on Wednesday, due to, as Colin said, the our midterm special, which came out yesterday. It is currently Tuesday, October 25th, 2022, at around 7:40 Pacific time.
Yep, and coming up on this episode of C&C Talks, there was another school shooting. The UK has a new prime minister. The World Series starts this week. Some updates on the NFL and college football, of course, and also we have a big announcement that's coming up kind of in the middle of our show, plus much more. So let's get right into it.
Yes. A shooting at a high school in St. Louis has occurred. There are 3 people are dead, and many others are injured. And just a reminder, we've had discussions like this before with Uvalde and our special episode about that. But what needs to be done to stop this from happening?
Yeah, well, so like you said, there was that whole incident in Uvalde, which I guess you could call way worse just because more people, younger kids, like 10 years old, these were like 3 high school age kids. Actually, I believe that there was only one student actually that died. I think that there was an old woman, and I think that the third person was actually the shooter, or the person who is believed to be the shooter. But right, anytime that there's a loss of life, when there doesn't have to be a loss of life, but that's a problem, and we should try to do something about it to prevent that problem from happening again, even if it's only like 1 or 2 or 3 people. And to me, the most obvious solution is an assault weapons ban, or background checks, or really all of the above. That's just kind of common sense. And what we have tried, it hasn't worked. And I know that there's a lot of people, mostly Republicans, who are pushing other things, the cause of the problem. It's that the guns aren't the cause of the problem. And for example, mental health might be the cause. I do think that mental health does play a role into it, but if they think that mental health plays a role into it, then why did almost every single Republican vote against funding for mental health services in schools? That's just right. It doesn't add up, and to me, they're just not taking the problem seriously, and it is a real problem, right? People are dying.
Yeah. We have some news from across the Atlantic. In the UK, Liz Truss has resigned as Prime Minister after just 45 days. It is the shortest term as Prime Minister in the history of the United Kingdom. So what was so disastrous? What happened to Liz Truss?
I mean, kind of everything, really, right? Just her economic plan just did not work, right? And I think you actually might have some more details on that, or am I mistaken?
I don't know a lot, but all I do know is that the economy is, of course, not great there, as it is, of course, across the world. And energy bills in the UK are incredibly high at the moment due to the fact that gas is now harder to get due to the Russia-Ukraine conflict. And a lot of British citizens are now having to possibly make the choice between either heating their house or getting food.
Yeah, so that's not a great result. So the new Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, he's the first person of color to ever hold the role. So, Charlie, who is the new Prime Minister, Sunak, and what will he do? What do you know about him?
From what I've heard from a couple of my friends who do live in the UK, he does seem to be more moderate than Liz Truss, and his stance on the economy seems to be repairing the damage done by Truss and then building on that to slowly bring Britain's economy back. As for his political idea of what he's going to do with the country, I don't really know too much about that yet.
Yeah, and let's remind people that, yes, more moderate, he's still elected by the Conservative Party. The next general election in the UK is, I believe, slated for 2024, though it could potentially happen sooner.
if so called for by Parliament.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Steve Bannon was sentenced to prison for contempt of Congress, given 4 months. The Department of Justice asked for 6 months. It also fined $6,500 out of a maximum of, I believe it was $100,000. That's the maximum sentence. Bannon will actually remain free pending appeal. And Charlie, I kind of feel like his strategy is just trying to stall for as long as possible because who knows? Maybe in 2025 there will be someone in the White House who's willing to grant him a pardon. But
Yeah,
that's the current state of Bannon. Meanwhile, we discussed Kanye West last week, but there's new news from Kanye. Charlie?
yes, Adidas has decided to cut their relationship with Kanye. Of course, both Adidas and Kanye are making big amounts of money on that partnership for shoes. This follows several anti-Semitic comments by Kanye. And let's move on now to the House Progressive Caucus signing a letter letter asking for a diplomatic solution to Ukraine. It was ultimately walked back, their position, after public backlash, because there was a problem with that, and that was.
Well, yeah, so there's a couple of problems with calling for a diplomatic solution in Ukraine. The first one isn't really the biggest problem, but it's still a problem, which is it's bad politics, like to break with your party in such a big way right before the midterms is not good for the Democrats. But I think that the biggest problem with it, Charlie, and I know that you know a lot about this from your studies of World War II, but is basically any sort of diplomatic solution would involve Ukraine giving up some land, probably one or two of the breakaway regions that Putin's trying to claim as his. And right, that's a problem because while it might not be a problem if Putin just gets those two regions, right, that's not what's going to happen. It's the strategy of appeasement, right? It did not work in World War II with Hitler, right? You give him that, he's going to be like, okay, that worked. So now I'm going to come back in another year and I'm going to try to do this again, and maybe they'll give me even more land.
The allowance of the militarization of the Rhineland, and then Austria, then the Sudetenland in Czechoslovakia, then the entirety of Czechoslovakia. None of that worked. Poland gets invaded, and the war starts.
Exactly. So it's not a strategy that set anybody up for success except really Russia, right? A red line has to be drawn somewhere, and why should it be drawn anywhere besides where it started? And I get the fear about using nukes, and
it is, of course, a serious threat.
Yeah, it's a very complicated situation, and I don't have a background in foreign policy. I don't have a background in much of anything. I'm a sophomore in high school, but so I don't know what the solution is, but it's not just letting Russia take more land and take more land and take more land. Meanwhile, some climate activists, in order to draw attention to climate change, they've been throwing food at popular paintings around the world, which is becoming a common tactic to promote, to promote doing something about the climate. So, Charlie, what are your thoughts on this strategy?
I think it is, of course, important to get the message out about the climate. I don't think throwing food and attempting to damage artwork is the best strategy, but I will say it is working because they are definitely getting their message out.
Yeah, I do wonder if, though, it brings a negative perception to them. The one thing that I will say is that some facts do need to be gotten straight, right? They're not actually destroying the artwork. They are, right, because there's glass protecting it. On occasion, there is actually minimal damage done to the frames, but again, not much. And no damage has yet to be done to any of the paintings, which has in the past included the Mona Lisa. And I think that the point here, Charlie, that the climate activists are trying to make is that people care so much, they're so outraged about the fact that a painting almost got destroyed, but where's the outrage on the climate change, right? Because it's a serious issue. In fact, it's one of the most important issues.
Yes, and that is certainly an interesting aspect of their strategy, proving that somewhat hypocrisy of the modern population.
Yeah. So that's going to do it with that segment of our show. But before we move on to some sports news, let's talk about something new that's coming to this podcast, and that is the C&C Talks 5, a roughly 5-minute long segment hosted by usually me, 3 to 7 days a week, exclusively on the C&C Talks YouTube channel. That might end up getting changed, though we at some point may make it more widely distributed among other platforms. It will come out at 7 a.m. Pacific time every, most days, recapping everything that happened the day prior. So it's perfect to listen to when you're driving into work or school. We're going to start this segment shortly after Thanksgiving, so in about a month. So be on the lookout for that. We will talk about it in more detail on future episodes as we get closer and closer to that launch date. But
And
Charlie, you have something about after hours.
Yes, as you may notice, since the summer, we haven't really done anything with after hours. We've been planning some things, and I will also have a new host with me, Drake. He's been in the background of a lot of our episodes, but he will now be joining me for a couple of after hours episodes coming out soon. So expect to see a lot more episodes coming out soon.
Yep. You are listening to the C&C Talks podcast. Thank you so much for listening, everybody. Let's move on to sports, and we're going to start with the Major League Baseball postseason.
Yes, the Phillies have won the NLCS, sending them to the World Series, beating the Padres in 5 games. It is their first World Series appearance since 2009. And the Astros swept the Yankees, so they fully swept their way through the playoffs as so far. This is their 4th World Series appearance in 6 years, and the World Series starts on Friday. What are your thoughts and predictions for how this series is going to go?
Okay, so, right, I mean, first of all, the Yankees just look bad. They just did.
They look terrible.
The Astros struggled more against the Mariners than they did against the Yankees, right? I'm just going to say it. That being said, I don't actually think that the Astros match up very well against the Phillies. It's hard to say that the Astros match up badly against anybody. They're just that good. But if there was a team in the postseason to beat them, I think that the Phillies are one of those teams that is capable of doing it. That said, though, I just think that the Astros are too good. I'm going to go Astros in 6 games. What about you, Charlie?
I think it's going to be closer than that. I think Houston's going to win the first 2 in Houston. Philly's going to win the first 2 in Philly. Philly's going to pick up a win in Houston Game 5, which is going to be immediately responded with Houston winning Game 6 in Philly, and Philly's going to come all the way, winning in Game 7. Philly's
Charlie, I don't know if this is going to change your view, but remember, it is a 2-3-2 format.
Is it?
Yeah.
All right, well, Philly's in 7 anyway.
Okay.
Yeah, honestly, I never even watched the World Series anyway, because the Mariners are never in it.
All right. Okay, let's move on to the NFL. Week 7 just concluded, and we're going to start with our hometown team, the Seattle Seahawks, who just absolutely bashed the Chargers, Charlie. Are they for real? They're 4-3. They're leading the NFC West.
I think it is very possible. If we work on our linebacker position a little bit, make sure our defensive and offensive line are there, I think we may be able to make the playoffs.
Yeah, and first of all, they would not be anywhere in this position without the trade, which is looking more and more like the best, well, among the best trades in modern sports history, or the most one-sided trade in modern sports history, because I'm sure the Broncos would call it the worst. But for me, I think that there are a couple obstacles to stop them from making the playoffs. For example, their schedule is still somewhat brutal. Also, they just lost DK Metcalf for the next 2 to 4 weeks, but I think it's possible. I think that, again, still not likely, but if Geno Smith keeps performing at the way that Geno Smith has been performing the last, or really since the beginning of the season, I think that they will have a real shot to make the playoffs.
And also, we need to factor in the fact that the entirety of the NFC has just been not great.
There are 5 teams in the NFC above 500, Charlie.
And Seattle's one of them.
Seattle's one of them. It's Seahawks, the Vikings, the Cowboys, the Eagles, and the Giants. Not in that order.
Which three of them are in the same division, by the way.
Correct, and we will get to some of those teams in just a moment. In fact, we'll start with the Cowboys, who beat the Lions on Dak Prescott's return. So, Charlie, the question is, Dak Prescott or Cooper Rush? Who are you taking for
I
the Cowboys going forward?
I think in the first half of that game, Dak really struggled, but I think coming into the second half, he gave them a couple of really explosive plays that I think they've been really lacking with Cooper Rush. I think Cooper Rush is a really good quarterback. I think there may be a couple teams that need him. For example, Carolina could really use him as a another option if Baker Mayfield continues to fail, shall we say. But I think Dak is the starter in Dallas.
Yeah, so they're actually going to play the Bears this week, so which should not be too tough of a game for them. So if Dak struggles, I think that we might see a move, but for now, I think it's Dak. Meanwhile, the Titans beat the Colts. So we've discussed this division, the AFC South, a lot on this show. What do you think's the state of that division right now?
A mess. The Titans are going to find a way to choke, as they always do. The Colts are terrible. And the other two teams, I'm just going to call them garbage and garbage 2, are cannibalizing each other again.
Yeah, and again, this is the team that after week 3, the Jacksonville Jaguars, we said was going to win that division. Yeah, no, we were wrong. Yeah, we were really, really, really wrong. So yeah, that happened. Yikes. Also yikes though is that the Green Bay Packers just got upset by the Washington Commanders, Charlie. What's going on in Green Bay?
I've heard a lot of things. Rodgers is playing badly. They don't have Devonta Adams. Their O-line's bad. They don't have any run game. It's just everything. That team is completely uncoordinated. One guy will have a great performance. The rest of the team will be terrible. The defense will show up. The offense can't score. The offense gets going. The defense falls apart. They have nothing going, and this is an absolute disaster of a year. I would not be surprised if Aaron Rodgers retires after this season.
And so does this mean though the Vikings will win this division? I mean, they're 5-1. The next closest team is pretty far off from that, shall we say?
I think if Green Bay loses again, they're done.
Yeah, especially since the Vikings have already beat the Packers once this year.
And also considering the fact that 3 of the last 4 games have had losses to the Giants, Jets, and Commanders, I think there's just no momentum, no morale, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see Jordan Love start at the end of the season.
I mean, we will get to the Jets and the Giants later because that's fascinating. But first, we'll talk about another stunning upset where the Panthers beat the Buccaneers 21-3. Yeah, that happened, Charlie.
Again, I will say it should have been 21-10. Mike Evans, what are you doing?
Yes, that is
dropping
correct.
A wide open. He had like 10 point some yards of separation between him and his closest defender. He completely dropped it. They have no momentum. And again, just like the Packers, the Buccaneers are a mess. Going into the season, we thought, can anyone stop Rodgers? It's going to be Rodgers and Brady and maybe Philly and maybe Dallas.
And maybe the Rams.
And maybe LA.
Struggled.
LA has been terrible.
Well,
Green Bay
they've struggled. They've showed signs of life recently, and they are coming off a bye week, so we'll see what that does for them against the 49ers.
Green Bay just doesn't exist anymore. They've just disappeared. I honestly was watching the end of the Packers game, and I was thinking, all right, well, I can't imagine that the Buccaneers have done badly. I looked at the score, and I was like, all right, well, that's the end of their season.
Yeah.
You can't come back from losing to the Panthers team with no head coach, essentially no wide receivers, without Christian McCaffrey, and they have their 3rd string quarterback.
Yeah, no, it's kind of pathetic. 2 comments, which is we said at the beginning of the year that the NFC was pretty weak this year. I don't think we realized it was this week. Second of all, I can't believe that Tom Brady sacrificed his marriage for this season.
Though I will say, I would not be surprised if at the end of the season we're sitting there in the postseason watching a 17-0 Eagles team destroy the entirety of the rest of the league.
I mean, with how weak the NFC is, I could see the Eagles right back in the Super Bowl, though I think that they will struggle to beat whoever comes out of the AFC. The AFC is just so much better.
Which, if we're looking at it objectively, is either going to be the Bills, the Chiefs, or the Jets.
Maybe. Yeah, so let's talk about those hot streaks that the Giants and Jets are on. What's happening? What's happening?
Um, I I would say the Jets defense has been pretty good. Sauce Gardner's been really good. And all of a sudden their offense is actually functioning. Brees Hall was playing great until he was injured. Zach Wilson's playing at least somewhat decent football.
Yeah, good but not great.
And for the Giants, I will say one name. Daboll. He has turned an absolute disaster of a team into a playoff contender. They're playing really well. Their defense could use a little bit of work. But all of a sudden, Daniel Jones looks like an actual quarterback.
He does, and I think that's Coach of the Year. I think he's Coach of the Year stuff.
I think it is a little bit unfair that everyone's been treating Daniel Jones so badly for the last few years. I mean, he's had 3 head coaches in the last 4 years. That is going to really damage your development. He finally has a good head coach. His offensive line's helping him out. He can scramble. He's making good decisions, and I wouldn't be surprised if the Giants make the postseason.
Oh, I think that they're pretty clearly going to make the postseason, right? 6 wins with 10 games left to go, right? Quite honestly, yeah. I think 9 wins is enough in the NFC, and I don't see them going 3 and I don't see them only going 3-7 the rest of the way. Definitely not 2-8.
I know that we talked about this after week 1 or week 2. I think the AFC is close enough that we don't really know too much about who's going to be making the playoffs there. Who do you got in the NFC for your playoff picture?
Okay, so I've got 3 teams from the NFC East, the Giants, the Eagles, and the Cowboys. I'm not going to give an order. I'm not going to say who's going to win the division yet. I've got the Vikings. I've got the Buccaneers because somebody has to make it from that disaster of a division. And am I up to 5 teams?
You didn't say anyone from the AFC West yet.
The NFC West? Yeah, so I'm up to 5 teams, Rams and what the heck, the Seahawks, why not?
So the Rams win in the division?
Yeah.
I don't know. From what as strange as it might seem, I think Walker's going to carry us to the playoffs. I mean, Kenneth Walker is going to take Seattle to the playoffs.
I mean, I hear you. At the same time, though, the division's tough because you have to beat the Rams. Right, they still have 2 games left against the Rams. The Seahawks have struggled against the Rams in the last few years, let's be frank. They just have. Meanwhile, the Bears beat the Patriots. Quarterback situation, Charlie. That's all I have to say. What do you do?
You hope for at least a third, and that's all you're going to take. Take a third, get rid of Mac Jones.
Why?
Do you remember what happened last time New England drafted a random quarterback no one had ever heard of and put him in?
What?
They got Tom Brady.
Yep.
So I'm starting to think, everyone said Mac Jones is the new Tom Brady, but my theory is get rid of Mac Jones. Bailey Zappi, I'm calling it right now. In the next 10 years, Bailey Zappi will win a Super Bowl. He will. He is very good. I didn't hear anyone talking about him. He comes in, wins a few games, playing really well. In fact, they benched Mac Jones. And they threw Zappi in a not great situation. He didn't play very well. But in the other games, he's been pretty good. And I could see him starting for the rest of the year. And
okay.
Not to mention, he's a rookie.
Okay, I hear you. The one thing I'm going to add, though, the one thing I'll say is Mac Jones took his team to the playoffs as a rookie. Right? What else needs to be said there?
That right. Is true. And you know what happened in round 1?
They got crushed by the Bills, yes.
They got flattened by Buffalo.
Yes, they did. So, but
and do you want to hear something interesting?
What?
Given the state of how random and weird and chaotic this year is, I don't know. Will the Patriots make the playoffs? They might. That's how stupid this year is so far.
It's really, really weird. The AFC's tougher, though, especially in the division they're in. They have 3. I think that there's 3 teams in that division who are better.
I would argue the Patriots are better than the Dolphins.
We shall see. Some other scores around the league: the Cardinals beat the Saints, the Bengals beat the Falcons, Ravens beat the Browns, the Raiders beat the Texans, the Chiefs beat the 49ers and the Dolphins beat the Steelers. Let's move on to college football, because there were some big games this week, Charlie.
Yes. LSU, who's unranked, upset number 7 Ole Miss. Number 10 Oregon beat number 9 UCLA. 8 TCU beat 17 Kansas State. Number 5 Clemson barely beats 14 Syracuse. Number 11 Oklahoma beats number 20 Texas. So as for new rankings, Ole Miss falls to 15. Texas and Mississippi State fall completely out of the rankings. LSU and South Carolina join. And it was the first ranking by the selection committee will come out after this week.
Yeah, after this upcoming week. So November 1st, I believe, in the late afternoon, I believe 6 p.m. Eastern time, we will get to see what the committee thinks in their first of several rankings that they do leading up to their official ranking at the end of the conference championship week, which will decide who goes to the playoffs. And right now, I'm really liking Georgia, Tennessee, and Ohio State and Clemson. I think that those are going to be the 4.
So no Alabama.
It's tough. I think that if Alabama wins the Big, I almost said the Big 12, the SEC championship game, then they will actually go to the playoff. But I think Georgia's better. I just do.
And to round out this episode, as we usually do, with the Formula One United States Grand Prix. This is the first race where we have a confirmed champion. Of course, we didn't have one last year, so the last race of the season. And actually, we do have some news on that. Red Bull was determined there was an error with their cost cap, and they were not over by as much as originally thought. So there will be nothing going on there. So Verstappen does have 2 titles. He maintains the one from last season. Interesting good for qualifying in Austin. And going into turn 1 on the first lap, Carlos Sainz was out again for the 4th time this season on lap 1 after being hit in the side pod by George Russell. And for the first time this season, we actually have a competitive race between Verstappen and Hamilton, as you remember last year with that insane title fight. And actually, it was very similar to last year with those with one of those cars hunting down the other one at the end of the race. But Verstappen did manage to pass Hamilton to win the race and win Red Bull the Constructors' Championship. Hamilton came in second, Leclerc in third, and it is finally the United States Grand Prix coming around the third to last corner, on the last lap. Sebastian Vettel had an amazing overtake on the outside of Kevin Magnussen. Also involved in that race was a big crash between Fernando Alonso and Lance Stroll, taking Stroll out of the race and giving Alonso a 30-second time penalty applied at the end of the race that dropped him from 7th to 15th. So we have 3 races left in this season. One at Mexico City in a few weeks, then one at Sao Paulo in Brazil, before finally the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix ends the year. And then in early February, we'll have preseason testing again for the new season.
All right, we are looking forward to it, but for today, that's going to do it for our episode. We said it would be short. It didn't end up being short, but that's okay. Make sure that you subscribe. We have episodes dropping every single Tuesday, wherever you listen to your podcasts. Also, visit our website, cctalks.net, or call us to ask us your questions, 360-389-2630. Also, make sure to follow us on Twitter at CC Talks Podcast. For our producer Morris, our production designer Zach, and our co-writer Drake, I'm Colin.
And I'm Charlie. See you next week.
And goodbye, everybody.